These holy walls were meant to shelter the faithful, but now they harbor something far more sinister. From blood-curdling screams echoing through empty naves to shadowy figures that vanish into thin air, these abandoned churches have become portals to a darker realm. Join us as we uncover the bone-chilling truth behind these forsaken houses of God. I used to find peace in perfect angles and clean lines. Now they haunt my dreams. As an architectural photographer, I've always been drawn to order, symmetry, precision. My OCD made me exceptional at my job. Every shot had to be exactly right. That's why they chose me to document St. Michael's Monastery before its demolition. A simple 2-week assignment, they said. I should have known better. The first red flag came during my initial walkthrough. The medieval stone walls seemed off somehow. I kept having to adjust my tripod. The floors looked level, but my spirit level showed subtle slopes that shouldn't be there. I blamed my equipment at first, changed the batteries, recalibrated, but the readings stayed the same. I started noticing other things too. The way the shadows fell at certain times of day, they created patterns that made no sense with the building's layout. I began photographing them obsessively, comparing angles, measuring distances. That's when I found the first connection. A news article from a teenager had gone missing during a school trip. Their last known location, the East Wing corridor, where I documented a strange repeating shadow pattern that seemed to point to something. I couldn't sleep that night. I went through local archives, found more disappearances, and 19, all in different parts of the monastery. But when I overlaid my photos with the building's original plans, the shadow patterns aligned perfectly with each location. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I took more pictures, measured more angles. The patterns were trying to tell me something. I knew it. I started spending nights there, setting up time-lapse cameras, tracking the shadows as they moved. That's when I noticed they didn't always follow the sun. Sometimes they moved on their own. I found myself tracing them with chalk, connecting points, drawing lines. The monastery's walls became covered in my calculations, my measurements, my desperate attempts to make sense of it all. Security called my supervisor about my erratic behavior, but I was so close to understanding. The shadows were creating a map, pointing to specific points in the foundation. I convinced the demolition team to let me document the basement one last time. The patterns led me to an old well shaft, sealed centuries ago. As I set up my tripod, the shadows shifted. For just a moment, they formed a perfect geometric shape, a shape I'd seen repeated in my research, the same shape found scratched into personal items left behind by every missing person. I backed away from the well, my heart pounding against my ribs. But I couldn't leave, not without one final shot. I raised my camera, adjusted the focus. That's when I saw it in my viewfinder, a figure, standing in the shadows, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly still, watching me. I ran, dropped my camera, left everything behind. They found me hours later, babbling about shadows and patterns. They blamed it on stress, on my OCD, on spending too much time alone in an old building. The monastery was demolished a week later. My photos were corrupted somehow, all of them, just static and darkness. But sometimes, when I'm editing other projects, I see those patterns again, in the corner of my screen, in the shadows of my office, growing, spreading, perfectly symmetrical, and I wonder, what if I was right? What if I was so close to understanding something? What if the demolition wasn't about urban development at all? What if they needed to bury what I'd found? I still check the spirit level in every room I enter. I can't help it. But now I pray for the bubble to be centered. Because when it's not, when things don't align quite right, I feel it watching me again, waiting for me to notice the patterns, to follow the shadows, to find the perfect symmetry it promised. My therapist says I need to let it go, move on, take my medication, but she doesn't understand the patterns are everywhere now. In the tile work of her office floor, in the arrangement of cars in the parking lot, in the way people unconsciously position themselves in waiting rooms. The world is trying to show us something, trying to reveal a deeper geometry that connects everything. Last week, I found an old architectural magazine from 1893, an article about a German church with the same structural quirks as St. Michael's. The same inexplicable angles, the same history of disappearances. I've started mapping similar buildings across Europe, ancient structures that don't quite follow the rules of classical architecture. Their locations form a pattern too, a vast geometric web spanning continents. I've covered my apartment walls with maps, strings connecting points, photos of buildings, newspaper clippings. My sister says I'm spiraling again, just like after Mom died. When I spent months analyzing traffic patterns trying to prove her accident wasn't random, maybe she's right. Maybe my mind is trying to create order from chaos again. I never wanted to come back to Millbrook. Not after everything that happened with the cult, Les, the years I spent helping others break free from their grip. But when Sarah stopped answering her calls, I knew something was wrong. We're twins, we always know. The local news had been covering the church fires for weeks. 3 historic buildings reduced to ash, each one older than the town itself. Sarah couldn't let it go. She kept digging, kept pushing. Emma, there's something bigger here, she told me during our last call. The Preservation Society, they're not what they seem. Her voice was different that night, scared. That was 2 weeks ago. The police say there's no evidence of foul play, just another reporter chasing a dead-end story. But they don't know what I know. They haven't seen the photo Sarah sent me. Old black and white images of our grandparents standing in front of the first church that burned. The same church where our mother used to take us before she disappeared too. I'm staying at Sarah's apartment now. Her laptop is still here, notes scattered everywhere. Red string connecting newspaper clippings to old property records, birth certificates, death records, all leading back to the Millbrook Historical Preservation Society. I recognize some of the names, children of the families I helped escape, now grown, leading citizens, pillars of the community, the same people who smile at me in the grocery store, who pretend they don't remember. Last night, I found Sarah's recorder hidden in a false bottom of her desk drawer. Her last entry makes my blood run cold. They're not preserving history, her voice whispers. They're preserving something else, something darker. The fires, they're not random. They're rituals and the society. They've been watching me, following me, I think. The recording cuts off there. Static, then silence. This morning I noticed a car parked across the street. Dark windows, engine running. When I went to check the mail, I found a letter. No return address, just a single line. Some flames should stay buried, Emma. The paper smells like smoke. And now, I hear footsteps on the stairs, coming closer, heavy boots on old wood. My phone has no signal, and the power just went out. But I need to write this down, need someone to know. If anything happens to me, look for the truth in the ashes. We were wrong about the cult. They never left. They just changed their name. The footsteps are at my door now. I can see shadows moving underneath, more than one person. There's a scratching sound like someone's picking the lock. I should run, but Sarah's research is here. The truth about what happened to our mother, to all the others who disappeared. I grab her laptop and the recorder. There's a fire escape outside the bedroom window, rusted metal that creaks under my weight. Behind me, I hear the door splinter open, voices calling my name. They know I'm here. The metal groans as I climb down, 3 stories above the alley below. My hands are shaking, but I keep moving. I have to, for Sarah, for Mom, for everyone they've taken. I make it to the ground just as flashlight beams cut through Sarah's bedroom window. The alley is dark, wet from recent rain. I run, my footsteps echoing off brick walls. I hear shouts above me, then the sound of the fire escape rattling. They're following. I clutch Sarah's laptop to my chest as I run. Her last words from the recording playing in my mind. The pieces finally clicking into place. The Preservation Society, the church fires, the missing people. It was never about protecting history. It was about erasing it. Burning away the evidence of what they've done, what they're still doing. I turn a corner, almost slip on the wet pavement. Behind me, the sound of feet hitting the ground. They're in the alley now, getting closer. I see my car ahead, parked where I left it this morning. If I can just make it. A hand grabs my jacket, pulls me back. I spin, elbow connecting with something solid. A grunt of pain. I break free. Sprint the last few feet to my car, keys fumbling in my hand. The engine roars to life just as dark figures emerge from the alley. I floor it, tires squealing on wet asphalt in my rearview mirror. I see them standing there, watching me go. They're not chasing anymore. They don't have to. They know what I know now. This was never about finding Sarah. She found something they've kept hidden for generations. And now they'll never let me leave, not until they finish what they started. With Sarah, with Mom, with all of them. But I have her research now, her proof, and I know what I have to do. I'm going to burn their secrets to the ground, just like they burned those churches, and this time, the truth won't stay buried in the ashes. I should have trusted my instincts that first day when I stepped into St. Augustine's. The silence wasn't just because of my hearing aids being turned down. It was deeper than that, more wrong. I restore historic buildings for a living. Been doing it for 12 years now, but this job, this remote little church in the mountains, it changed everything. The town council seemed desperate to get the restoration started, offering way above my usual rate. Red flag number 1 right there, but I needed the work. Winter is always slow for restoration projects, and my rent wasn't going to pay itself. The church stood alone on a hillside, all Gothic spires and crumbling stone, beautiful in that creepy sort of way. I noticed the deeper cracks in the foundation first, way worse than what was in the initial report. Then the modifications that made no sense. Hidden doors that shouldn't be there, makeshift ventilation systems in the basement that didn't match any original blueprints. But what really got to me, what really made my skin crawl, were the scratches, deep gouges in the basement walls, like someone was trying to claw their way out. I documented everything, took photos, made detailed notes. That's when the warning started. First, it was just looks from locals when I grabbed coffee in town, then anonymous notes left on my car. Leave it alone. Some history should stay buried. I kept working, kept digging, found medical equipment hidden in sealed rooms, ancient surgical tools caked with something dark, records dating back to 1943 about experiments. Terrible things done to people who wouldn't be missed. The deeper I went into the church's history, the worse it got. Found documents about missing people, dozens of them, all from neighboring towns, all vanishing between 1943 and 1952. The dates matched perfectly with the records I'd found. My hands were shaking as I photographed everything. The locals knew, they had to know. That's why they kept their distance, why they crossed the street when they saw me coming. I started noticing a black SUV following me home that night, no plates. The driver always staying just far enough back. I'd turn up my hearing aids, straining to hear if anyone was behind me when I walked to my car. The paranoia was getting to me, making me jumpy. But I knew I wasn't imagining the footsteps in the church basement, the shadows that moved when no one should be there. I found more hidden rooms, each one worse than the last. Restraints bolted to walls, strange stains on concrete floors that no amount of cleaning could remove, boxes of personal belongings, watches, rings, old photos, all labeled with numbers instead of names. The town council kept checking in on my progress, always with those tight smiles, those cold eyes. I knew I had to expose it, had to tell someone, but in a town this small, who could I trust? The council member showed up one evening as I was finishing up. I didn't hear him coming, one of the downsides of being hearing impaired. He was standing right behind me when I turned around, smiling that politician smile, said he wanted to check on my progress. But I saw his eyes dart to my camera, to my notebook, his smile never reaching those shark-like eyes. I played dumb, said everything was going great, normal restoration stuff. He nodded, but I saw something cold in his eyes. That night, someone broke into my motel room, took everything, all my evidence, my laptop, my cameras, even my backup hard drive. But they didn't know about the files I'd already uploaded to the cloud, or the samples I'd mailed to a friend, a journalist I trusted, or the GPS tracker I'd hidden in the church basement, recording every entrance and exit for weeks. I left town that night, drove straight through till morning, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, every set of headlights in my rear view making my heart race. I filed reports with state authorities. They're investigating now, but the town's closing ranks, protecting their secret. The official story is that I damaged historical property, fabricated evidence, made up wild stories. But I know what I found. I know what happened in that church. Sometimes I think about those missing people, Wonder if their families ever knew what really happened to them. If they're still waiting for answers, I still restore old buildings, but I'm more careful now about which projects I take, about which towns I work in. I installed better security systems in my home, started carrying a panic button. Sometimes at night, I think I hear footsteps behind me, that politician's smile haunting my dreams. And I wonder, how many other small towns, how many other old churches, are hiding horrors behind their walls? Last week I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a single photo, the church on that lonely hillside. But it was different now, fresh paint, new windows, all evidence of my work, my investigation, erased like it never happened. I never thought old church ledgers could get someone killed, but here I am, hiding in a motel room, jumping at every sound. My laptop screen casts an eerie glow as I told this. I need to get this story out, just in case. I used to be the accountant at St. Thomas Church in Boston. 15 years managing the books, never a single error. I love my quiet life, my small office with its view of the courtyard, the satisfaction of balanced books and orderly spreadsheets. Until that morning when Father Richardson called me into his office. There were investigators. They had questions about missing funds, about wire transfers I supposedly authorized. My hands were shaking as I tried to explain. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but the evidence was there in black and white. My signature, but it wasn't mine. Someone had forged it perfectly. The investigators didn't believe me when I said I'd never seen these transactions before. They showed me document after document, years of systematic fraud, all traced back to my computer, my login, my passwords. I lost everything that day, my job, my reputation, my peace of mind. That's when I started digging. I couldn't just accept the blame, not after 15 years of dedication. I drove to every closed parish in New England, dusty basements, abandoned offices, following the paper trail backwards through decades of financial records. Some nights I slept in my car, too far from home to turn back, too determined to stop. At first it seemed random, small discrepancies, missing donations, unexplained expenses. But then I noticed a pattern. Shell companies, the same names kept appearing, always connected to church renovation projects that never happened. The deeper I dug, the more nervous I got. Some of these companies trace back to the 1970s. The amounts were staggering. Millions disappeared through a maze of fake contractors and ghost employees. I compiled everything into spreadsheets, created timelines, drew connections, cross-referenced names with old parish directories. I was so focused on proving my innocence, I didn't notice I was being watched. The break-in happened 3 nights ago. I came home to find my apartment ransacked, every drawer emptied, every file cabinet turned over. My desktop computer was gone, but they didn't know about my backup files hidden in an old hymnal. Then I found the note pinned to my bedroom door, just 4 words. Stop looking, final warning. I should have listened, but I was too close. The numbers were starting to tell a story someone desperately wanted to keep buried. Yesterday, I traced a company called Heritage Restoration Services to an abandoned church in Providence. The basement was filled with moldy boxes of records. The air was thick with decay, decades of secrets rotting in the dark. I was photographing documents when I heard footsteps above, heavy boots on old floorboards. I killed my flashlight, held my breath. The footsteps got closer, then stopped at the basement door. I could see shadows through the crack under the door. They knew I was down there. I never moved so quietly in my life, sliding behind a stack of boxes. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. The door creaked open. Flashlight beams swept the basement. I heard whispers, then the sound of gas canisters hitting the floor. The smoke burned my eyes, my lungs. But I knew the basement layout by then. I felt my way to the coal chute, forced it open, and squeezed through. The metal was rusted, cut into my hands. But I didn't feel the pain until hours later. I ran 6 blocks before stopping. Found this motel, started uploading everything I'd discovered. Now I'm sending these files to every news outlet I can find. The story has to get out. The truth about where the money went, who's been protecting this secret for decades, how deep the corruption goes. The fake companies aren't just in New England anymore. They spread across the country like a cancer. Hundreds of millions laundered through faith and trust. I hear footsteps in the hallway, getting closer. My hands are shaking as I type this. Heavy boots, just like in the church. They're stopping at my door. My phone buzzes, a reply from a reporter. They want to meet, want to verify my story. But I don't think I'll make it. The door handle is turning. I hit send. Remember, I tried to expose the truth. The door is opening. I see. A janitor's cart, just the night cleaning staff. My heart is racing with relief. But wait, something's wrong. The cart is empty. No cleaning supplies, just a black duffel bag. The man isn't wearing a uniform. He's looking right at me, smiling. That same smile I saw in an old parish photo from 19th, the son of Heritage Restoration's founder. He reaches into the duffel bag. I have to end this here. If these files reach you, follow the money. The truth is in the numbers, and whatever you do, don't trust the renovations. I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about that night in the cathedral. My hands shake as I told this, but people need to know what happened down there. It started with my best friend Jade's video. She caught these cops beating up this homeless guy behind the old St. Christopher's Cathedral. Classic case of wrong place, wrong time, except she dropped her phone when they spotted her. I couldn't let them get away with it, not again. That's how me and Jade and her brother Ray ended up breaking into that massive Gothic nightmare at midnight. The plan seemed simple enough: get in, find the phone, get out. We'd done dumber things for our TikToks. The cathedral had been abandoned for years. Just this hulking stone ghost watching over downtown, its spires bleeding into the night sky. I remember standing there, looking up at those gargoyles. Their hollow eyes seemed to follow our every move. Getting in was easy, too easy. Ray jimmied a basement window and we slipped inside. The beam from my flashlight caught centuries of dust swirling in the air. The musty smell of decay filled my lungs with every breath. Pale moonlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting weird colored shadows that danced across the floor. It was dead silent except for our footsteps echoing off the stone walls. We found Jade's phone pretty quick, right where she said she dropped it by the back entrance. But that's when everything went wrong. We heard voices, heavy boots on stone. "Police, stay where you are." The tactical unit, they must have been watching the place, waiting. My heart nearly stopped when I saw their guns, black metal glinting in the darkness. Ray grabbed my arm and yanked me toward this old wooden door. We sprinted down a narrow staircase, deeper and deeper under the cathedral. The air got thicker, colder. Each breath felt like ice in my chest. The tunnels down there, they weren't on any blueprints. Hundreds of years old, a maze of cold stone passages stretching for miles under the city. Our flashlight beams bounced off wet walls, creating strange shifting shadows that made me jump at every turn. We kept running, the sounds of pursuit getting closer. The tunnel floor was slick with condensation. I nearly fell twice. That's when we saw the first signs of life. Makeshift beds, cooking supplies, personal belongings, photographs pinned to the walls, faces smiling out from happier times. An entire community of people living down here, forgotten by the world above. Some of them looked scared, others angry. We'd invaded their home. The beam of my flashlight caught movement ahead. More police. We were trapped between them and the residents. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Every shadow seemed to hide another threat. I could hear Ray's ragged breathing next to me, feel Jade trembling against my shoulder. Then this weird clicking sound started echoing through the tunnels, like someone tapping on pipes, but with a pattern to it. The homeless people seemed to understand it. They started melting into the shadows, disappearing into passages I hadn't even noticed. Jade pulled us into this tiny alcove as footsteps thundered past. We stayed there for what felt like hours, trying not to make a sound. The air was so thick with moisture it felt like drowning. Finally, this old woman found us, her face lined with years of hard living. She had these eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness, like a cat's. She looked at the phone in Jade's trembling hands and nodded slowly. "Come with me," she whispered. Her voice was rough, like she hadn't used it in years. She led us through a maze of passages I never would have found on my own. Sometimes she'd stop, head tilted like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then more of that weird clicking would echo through the tunnels. She'd nod and we'd change direction. got us to a maintenance tunnel that came up 3 blocks away. The woman disappeared before we could thank her, vanishing into the darkness like she'd never been there. We uploaded the video as soon as we got home. It went viral. The officers were suspended pending investigation. But I still can't shake what I saw down there. That hidden world beneath our feet. Those eyes watching us from the darkness. The way they communicated, like they'd developed their own secret language in the depths. Sometimes when I walk past the cathedral, I swear I can hear whispers carried on the wind, that clicking sound echoing up from below. A reminder that there are spaces between spaces in this city. Places where the forgotten go to disappear. Places that don't want to be found. And sometimes I wonder if part of me is still down there, lost in those endless tunnels, still running from the echoes of footsteps in the dark. I should have listened to my producer when she warned me about digging too deep into cold cases. The thing about true crime is, once you start pulling at threads, everything starts to unravel. I've been doing my podcast, Unsolved Echoes, for 3 years now, covering missing persons cases, unexplained deaths, the usual stuff that keeps people up at night. But this one was different from the start. It began with an email from a listener about the Haven Valley Baptist Church disappearances. September 12, 1910, an entire congregation vanished without a trace. Not just a few people, we're talking about 47 men, women, and children, just gone. I remember sitting at my desk that night, reading through old newspaper clippings. The official story was that they'd all packed up and left town together. Some kind of mass exodus, but that didn't add up. People don't just leave behind their homes, their jobs, their bank accounts, their pets. I started making calls, digging through archives, interviewing former residents. That's when things got weird. Every time I mentioned Haven Valley to local officials, they'd clam up, change the subject, or suddenly have somewhere else to be. Then I found Patricia. She was just a kid when her aunt and cousins disappeared with the congregation. She told me about the men in suits who'd started showing up at church meetings months before everyone vanished. How they'd talk about advancing human potential and unlocking the mind's true capabilities. Government types, she said. They'd handpicked Haven Valley for some kind of special program. The more I dug, the stranger it got. Old church members who weren't there that Sunday started reaching out. They all told similar stories about the meditation sessions that became mandatory, the strange pills they were asked to take as part of their spiritual enhancement, the headaches that followed, the gaps in their memories. I spent weeks piecing together fragments, following paper trails that led nowhere, dead ends that somehow felt deliberate. Then last month, I got my hands on a classified document, heavily redacted, but what I could make out made my blood run cold. Project Mind Gate, controlled behavioral studies, neural reprogramming. The dates lined up perfectly with Haven Valley. I was finally onto something, but that's when the warnings started. First, it was just hang-up calls. Then my apartment was broken into, nothing taken, just papers scattered everywhere. Like someone was searching, my laptop disappeared for 2 days, then showed up back on my desk like it had never been gone. Except all my files were corrupted. The audio interviews, gone. The scanned documents, erased. But I had backups, hidden away where they couldn't find them. I'm not that naive. Last night, I was walking to my car after a late editing session when I heard footsteps behind me, getting closer, faster. I ran, didn't look back until I was safely inside. But I know what I saw in my rearview mirror, men in black suits, standing under the streetlight, watching me drive away. This morning, I found a note on my windshield, just 3 words: stop the investigation. But I can't stop now, not when I'm this close. Yesterday, I talked to a former janitor who worked at a government facility near Haven Valley. He remembered the buses rolling in late at night, people walking in looking dazed, empty. The screams he heard from the basement labs, the way some of them never walked back out. I'm posting this story everywhere I can think of because people need to know what really happened at Haven Valley. The government wasn't just studying these people, they were experimenting on them, using a church congregation as unwitting test subjects, perfect guinea pigs, isolated, trusting, already conditioned to believe in higher powers. If anything happens to me, look for the connections. Project Mindgate, the missing congregation, the classified behavioral studies that nobody wants to acknowledge. The truth is out there, hidden in plain sight. And now I think they're coming for me too, just like they came for them. I can hear footsteps outside my door as I told this, heavy boots on the hallway carpet. That familiar sound of suits rustling, metal clicking against metal. I'm sending this now before they... The door just burst open. 3 men in dark suits. I can see the earpieces, the government badges. They're saying something about national security, classified information, making me stand up. Taking my phone, my laptop, but they don't know about my backup drive. Hidden in the air vent above my kitchen sink, the one with everything I've uncovered, all the evidence, the real story of Haven Valley. If you're reading this, it means my dead man's switch worked. The files are already uploading to secure servers across the internet, to every major news outlet, every investigative journalist I trust, the truth about Project Mindgate, about what they did to those people. I should have listened to my viewers when they told me not to go into the basement, but that's the thing about live streaming. You get caught up in the moment, in the thrill of discovery, the rush of showing your followers something new. I've been urban exploring for 3 years now, documenting abandoned places across the city for my channel. That night, I chose an old Catholic church that had been shut down in the 90s. The kind of place that usually gives great content, vintage architecture, forgotten artifacts, hidden spaces. I had my usual setup, phone mounted on my stabilizer, backup battery pack, flashlight. Hey explorers, it's your girl Liv back with another night adventure. I spoke quietly to my camera as I slipped through the broken side door. The beam of my flashlight caught dust particles dancing in the air. Everything exactly as I expected. Crumbling plaster, broken pews, shattered stained glass that cast strange shadows in my light. The chat was going crazy with excitement as I showed them the altar area. That's when I noticed it. A door behind the confessional, partially hidden by debris. Looks like we found something interesting, guys. I adjusted my camera and tried the handle. It opened with a grinding screech, revealing steep stone steps descending into darkness. The chat exploded with warnings, but I was already heading down, drawn by the mystery. The basement level was a maze of tunnels, probably used for storage back in the day, but something felt off. The air was different down here, not as stale as it should be. And then I saw it, a fresh padlock on one of the doors, completely out of place in this abandoned building. My light caught something else, scuff marks on the floor, recent ones. The chat was going wild now, some telling me to get out, others urging me to investigate. That's when I heard it. Voices somewhere deeper in the tunnels, and crying, definitely crying. My hands started shaking as I crept closer to the sound. The next room made my blood run cold. Makeshift beds, chains bolted to the walls, empty water bottles and food wrappers, all recent. Oh my God, my whisper echoed in the silence. Guys, I think I just found a door slammed somewhere behind me, footsteps, heavy ones, coming closer. I killed my flashlight, plunging myself into total darkness. Keep streaming, I whispered to my viewers. Whatever happens, don't stop watching. Someone needs to see this. The footsteps stopped. Voices echoed from another tunnel. Check every room, someone's down here. The voice was rough, angry. I glanced at my phone, thousands watching now. The chat moving fast, multiple people saying they'd called the police. Given them the location, I had to stay hidden, stay quiet. But that crying kept pulling at me. Someone needed help. Moving slowly, each step carefully placed, I edged along the wall. My hand brushed against metal, a door handle. The crying was louder now, just on the other side. I tested it. Unlocked. Please, I mouthed silently to my viewers. Let help be coming. The door opened with a faint click. The room was bigger than the last, lined with more beds. Young women huddled in corners, their eyes wide with fear as they saw my light. I held a finger to my lips. One nodded slightly. I aimed my camera slowly around the room, making sure to capture everything. The conditions, the faces, the evidence. A voice boomed from behind me. Found something? My heart stopped. I spun around, the camera catching a glimpse of a large man filling the doorway. His face twisted in rage. I threw my flashlight at his head and ran. Not toward the exit, I was too turned around for that. But deeper in, away from him. His cursing echoed as he chased me. The phone's light barely showed the ground ahead. Left turn, another right. More footsteps joining the chase. My lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. A faint glow caught my eye, natural light. A storm drain, half hidden behind debris. I scrambled toward it, shoving broken concrete aside. It was tight, but I could fit, had to fit. The opening led to a drainage tunnel, wet and slick, but ahead, maybe 30 feet, I could see moonlight. Street light, freedom. The men were right behind me now, close, so close. I pushed harder, crawled faster. My knee hit something sharp, but I barely felt it. The exit was right there, just a few more feet. And then sirens, police sirens getting closer. The men's curses turned panicked, footsteps retreating. I pulled myself out onto wet grass, into fresh air, flashing lights everywhere now. Police cars, ambulances, they'd found us. Found them. My phone was still streaming, still recording, the chat exploding with relief. Support. Shock at what they'd witnessed. I slumped against a wall, finally letting myself breathe. The police found the others quickly, following my directions through the tunnels. The women were brought out one by one, given blankets, care. Their nightmare finally over. Mine would stay with me, though.